finally back on our regular schedule. Again, appreciate it. We got a lot of quick notes to get, and of course, happy to take your questions afterwards. You may have heard us mention during council, but very, very excited to announce a urban and community forestry grant. Again, our grants office and so every grant we do, so many members of our team play some kind of role in, be it Public Works, Parks and Rec. Of course, in this case, Chris Stoltz, our city arborist. But we were awarded a $1 million grant that will be spent in the city's underserved, disadvantaged areas, and it'll cover tree planting and maintenance, restoration and resilience, and workforce development. So we received $1 million in total. So about $700,000 of that will be for planting, and in these LMI, CDBG areas where statistics show that the average temperature on the sidewalk in underserved communities throughout our country can be 10 to 15 degrees warmer because of the lack of tree canopy. So obviously, unfortunately, we certainly have areas that we're going to be able to use this very, very quickly. But it's great to have those funds. And then about $300,000 will be spent on the education portion. So we're going to actually hire an urban forester, an outreach coordinator, and that we'll have tools, training, resources, and education that will happen throughout our community. So very, very excited to have that up and going, and we'll come up with our strategy moving forward. In the meantime, I know coming to council in the next 30 days or so will be, I mentioned several months back that we would come forward with a well thought out plan on how we would use tree planting trust fund dollars. I don't know that that's necessarily happened. We've been, I think as a city overall, pretty reactionary in how we use those dollars, for better or worse. You guys remember, we debated whether you can use it to maintain or to take out trees that are issues. And of course that was a controversial vote at the time. So what we said is, hey, I think we owe the city, we owe the council a well thought out plan of how we're going to do more tree planting. So again, same team that helped put this grant together also put that strategy together. We're going to be bringing forward about a $75,000 proposal of that tree planting trust fund. And what has been looked at is the areas that need it the most, the areas where people are using the sidewalks the most, where they can be planted without interference from power lines and other things. So we've really looked at it all. So I'm very excited to see that come forward, and I'm sure the council is as well, that we're not just trying to do this one tree at a time or $1,000 at a time, but that there's a complete thought as it pertains to making sure that those dollars are used wisely. So that timeline will not be affected by this grant. We'll continue forward with that with council, as well as, again, very excited to have another $1 million to help our tree canopy here in the city. Also excited, American Magic, if you didn't see, that won the preliminary regatta over in Barcelona, and so that's obviously a great sign for things to come. Has no impact on the America's Cup in terms of winning it next year, but when you beat out the team that's defending the America's Cup to win a regatta, that's always a good sign about your crew and all the amazing people that help make that organization and help make that boat successful. And so super, super excited for them. And again, very nice to have our professional home team over there representing and being the best in the world, at least this weekend. So that was great. Just a quick update on Roger Scott Tennis Center. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule on that, and the project's about 75% complete. And the tennis court paving will start next week, obviously, like anything outdoors, weather permitting. So if we have any weather issues, that could get delayed. But we hadn't given you an update in a little while on that. Just want to let you know we're about 75% and a little bit ahead of schedule. So great news there. You've seen some conversations around, and again, happy to take questions on some of the development happening downtown. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around the hotels. You've heard about the hotel project on Gregory and 13th, and we're working through an agreement and LTUs with them. With parking, and then of course there's a 9-story hotel where the old side of New World Landing is being proposed. It's going for conceptual approval at ARB. And that doesn't have any conversation yet with the right-of-way or parking or anything like that. But they are that's what they're going to get is conceptual review. So there's still some work to do, and I'm going to be meeting with those developers actually tomorrow morning to have some conversations with them. On the greater picture of both these projects and future projects coming, as you guys have probably reported, there's several hotels being proposed in the city, which is a great sign. I'm very happy to hear that. But we're also going to make sure that we stay up with the times. And what I mean is we're going to be looking at and reviewing all of our parking licenses to use throughout the city, our existing and our future. And because when there was conversation around $1,000 a year for several spaces, I don't think that's equal. And there's a very good test you can do, which is I always say, well, if you'll lease us spaces for $1,000 a year, we'll take those and use them. So, and usually they'll say no to that, and that means it's probably not a fair deal for the city. So, I've had a conversation with the folks at 13th and Gregory. They're looking at for the spaces that they've been talking about, those 21 spaces, those would be built at their cost, which is about $250,000 that needs to be factored in. Also, we may go ahead and proceed with what the current structure of parking LTUs has been probably for years and years, this $1,000 a year, but they're fully aware that we're coming back and revamping those. So we don't want to slow the project down because we know we'll get to some kind of agreement, but the developers are fully aware. They've sent us a letter actually notating that to council and myself that says, hey, we are expecting that the city's going to be revamping these parking LTUs and that there may be an additional cost outside of what's agreed to. Because understand, the LTUs that we have right now, the standard LTU also allows the city to opt out of those. So it's not like we're locked in for a certain amount of time. But I think with all of the great problem to have, all of these current projects pending and future projects, we've got to make sure that we are, as costs rise, as stormwater rises, all these other things, staffing, all these things are expenses to the city. We got to make sure that we are honoring the taxpayer by when we are giving away their right of way, that we're making sure that we get good value for it. And so I have not met a developer that doesn't understand that and that doesn't understand our case for that. So our team right now internally is working on what that structure will look like moving ahead. And so looking forward to having those conversations with both these developers and folks in the future, as well as folks that have had LTUs for many, many years for parking in the city. We're going to look at those, review those, and see what kind of changes we need to make. District 3 Town Hall is Tuesday, September 26th with Casey Jones. That is at Bayview Community Center at 5:30. The Haas Resident Satisfaction Survey closed on September 15th. We got about 1,800 surveys, so that's great. I mean, more than enough sample size, and I mean that's about 3% of the entire city. So really looking forward to diving in. We may get some preliminary numbers in the next week or so, but the final report from the Haas Center will probably be in about 30 days. So looking forward to getting a look at that. Mayor's Neighborhood Cleanup, Saturday, September 23rd, and that's in Scenic Heights and Spanish Trail area. So that is coming up this Saturday. Make sure you leave your eligible items out there. And again, there's on our City of Pensacola website, there's a map. There is what those eligible items are, and we also have sent a mailer out to all the folks that they should be getting that to know if they are in that area. Recycling sanitation changes. This is your last recycling pickup date this week. Again, we've sent postcards out to all 21,000 sanitation customers, giving them their new dates, all of that. But again, I just continue to remind folks, cityofpensacola.com/recycling info has everything that you need to know, your new dates and everything else that we're working towards. Bay Bluffs, again, we are closing that indefinitely at this point. We are estimating roughly $1 million plus in repairs to if we were to go take that on right now. We don't have anything in the budget for that at the moment. So we are going to secure it as best we can, do the demolition as best we can. If there's anything that we can preserve up by the road or by the parking lots that is still safe for people to use, we will do that. But more to come on what we definitely want to replace it with something. It may not be the exact same trail, the exact same path, but we aren't saying that we're closing it forever. But we've got to get our feet back under us and get a real understanding of not only what we're going to put in, but also as we continue to move forward, making sure that we're maintaining the things that we have. And as I said on the radio this morning, no one signs up to be mayor to close parks and close community centers. That's not what I want to do. That's certainly not great fun news to deliver to citizens who pay taxes in order to use these amenities and what makes it great to live here. But at some point, the buck stops at public safety and people's children and the citizens of this community being unsafe at one of these parks. I think logic has to prevail at some point, and we just have to say, hey, we can't really speak for the lack of maintenance generationally that's happened that got us here. All we can do is make sure that we put the structure in place that as we get more things online and we have new amenities or amenities that are starting to age, that we make sure that we have a better plan in place to get as much life out of them as we can. I think that is all I've got. One more thing. We did get a good report back on Pensacola Motor Lodge that there's no asbestos on site. So that's a great step in the right direction. That could have been a potential issue that could have derailed us moving forward with that, depending on what the cost was looking like there. So that's good news. We have a little bit more environmental work to do there, but at this point, we've checked with EPA, others. We feel pretty good about the quality of the environmental and how that's going to come back at the Motor Lodge. So we continue to work. Our CRA department is working with Florida Housing and others about building really the first template that we would have for some kind of a RFP agreement where we'd go out and put units in and try to get them into the affordable inventory and work with someone in the private sector to be able to do that. So that's a great positive step in terms of acquiring the Motor Lodge and getting that going. So that is it from me, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Mayor, real quick, about the bluff. You talked about the bluff.
Mm-hmm.
Is the city looking at other parks that may be under-maintained?
Well, look, I want to be clear. I mean, there isn't a city in this country that has 100% pristine maintenance across every park that they have. I think that's always going to be a challenge. There can always be more money spent maintaining things. But I think the better way to put it is we've come in and tried to have a closer look at the condition of these places. And so when you do that, when you turn the rock over, you're going to find things you may not like. But that is what I feel like is the duty of my position, is the duty of the city, is not to just pretend like something isn't there or to pretend like it's not a problem, but we just got to face it head on. So we've done that. And again, that's not fun for me. That's not fun for our Public Works Department or our Parks and Rec Department. It's not fun for anybody, but it's the right thing to do. And so I'm appreciative of our team going out, being objective about the condition of these places, and making sure that we have good solutions for maintenance and good solutions for repair in the long term.
Mayor, Representative Saltzman said at a public meeting last week that the delegation, including Senator Broxson, were looking for ways to fund the demolition of the Baptist campus. Mm-hmm. Have you met with Senator Broxson, and if so, what kind of feedback have you gotten from him?
Yeah, we have. We've met with Senator Broxson, Representative Andrade, and I would say the same. I think that our delegation is certainly willing, as always, if it's a priority for the city or for our area, that they're willing to take that on. I think we are in alignment on that is important, and we know that this is a huge parcel of property in a small city in terms of square miles. So we know that the potential generational impact this can have. We know the negative impact it could have on the existing neighborhood if nothing is done. So I think they feel the shared duty that we do, that to do our best to make sure that what's left behind at the Legacy campus is something that we can be proud of at the city. So I feel very confident that we have their support moving forward. Now it's just a matter of us and Baptist getting on the same page. And that's where we left the meeting with Senator Broxson. We met with the Baptist officials as well, and we said, hey, it's time for us to start getting committed, getting serious about what an agreement would look like in terms of the donation of the property. So they've left it, Senator Broxson, as of the last conversation I've had with him, has left it to us and Baptist to work through that and then come back to him with something that he can get behind and support.
Well, I'd like to follow up.
Sure.
This may be premature, but do you think Baptist bears some financial responsibility in the ultimate demolition?
Yeah, well, if they were to ultimately donate 36 acres or more to the city for their efforts and to go procure this funding through state channels and others, I think that would be their argument, is to say, hey, there is value to some of this property that is our contribution. So, of course, I think I've said all along, Baptist is not running away from the idea that they have an obligation to what happens with this demo, that they can't go to a new hospital and just pretend that nothing has happened, and we have an obligation too. I just said it's not within the city doesn't have to do this, but I feel like we do have an obligation to do this in terms of the future of our city. So I think we share in some commitment level here. And we're going to work through what that obligation is. And we're going to ask Baptist to do certain things in this donation agreement. And they're going to want some certainty in this donation agreement. So I believe we have a meeting next week with Baptist officials to work through some of those punch list items of what those are going to be. That's the timeline. Once we have that, our attorneys and their attorneys will get together but it'll probably be in the form of a donation agreement, not necessarily an MOU, which would be, it would be the term.
Yeah. So does that mean you need to have an agreement done by the start of the session in order to get funding?
Yeah, but look, remember, what this donation agreement is going to allow us to do is for us to go get significant demolition dollars at the state level, it's going to have to be city-owned property, right? So, I mean, these funding sources are going to require that it be publicly owned. What this allows us to do is, without the property changing hands, we're able to go to these sources and say, hey, look, here's an agreement that says that the property is going to be donated. And look, I don't think it's fair to the city for us to take on a donation without having a potential solution, a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I think that is part of Baptist's obligation as well, is this will remain their property until we've been able to get the funding, put in place. So I think it really just comes down to Baptist and the City of Pensacola getting aligned. And, when we walk through that door to go out and advocate and push hard to get this funding, that we're in agreement about the direction we're going. And that's what will happen in what our goal is to happen, of course, before session starts. So, again, we have full alignment, and we've been able to give our delegation, what that agreement is and help them be as equipped as possible to go help us procure that funding.
Mayor, has Baptist told you what their security plan is for the property, and what functions will stay there as they leave?
They have shared some of it, and we've got some thoughts on that too that we'll be talking about next week. So I know they have a security plan. I don't want to try to rehash it just because I don't want to miss something that, I don't want to leave something out that they're going to do that I didn't mention. But I do know they have one. There were some questions I had about certain hours that they're going to be securing it and things like that. So that a part of the donation agreement, even though that may not be in it, there's some other things like that we'll be talking about next week as well.
For the city to take over this piece of land, is there? I know you've talked about wanting to have like workforce housing for that kind of thing. What is do you think it's necessary to have a clear vision of what comes after the demolition, like written down and articulated?
What I can say is, Baptist has had meetings with groups that have master plan things like this. We have had meetings with folks that have heard from Baptist and said, well, hey, this property may end up being in the city's possession. So we've had very preliminary initial conversations with groups that have taken a parcel like this and done exactly what you just described. I think it's probably a little premature to say, to pick out, where the houses go and where the streets are going to be at this point. I think we've got a big lift in front of us right now. That might be a multi-year lift. There's no guarantee that we're going to be able to get all the funding to demolish. Again, that $17 to $20 million figure that's out there now. The significant portion of that is the towers and the hospital itself, but it's not all of it. So there's a lot of scenarios to play through. What if we get $12 million? Do we go forward with the demolition? What if we're short? Is that Baptist's obligation, the city's, others? Do we wait another year? So those are the kinds of details that we're really focused on right now. I think I can guarantee you that this project, moving forward, whenever we get this done, and I'm confident we will, when we get this done, that amount of property in the heart of our city is going to be based around housing. I mean, there's no doubt about that, whether that's military influence on housing, whether that's affordable housing, all of the above. We're going to have great opportunity. But I can tell you, if this is city property, whenever that is, a year from now, a couple years from now, and this is city property for us to have conversations about, I can tell you they're all going to start with what the housing solution is going to be, period. So where they're going to go, the details around exactly number of units, all that is probably too premature at this point.
Mayor, real quick, another quick. The Cervantes barriers, there's several of them have been damaged recently. Is there anything in the budget to repair those, or is there concerns on the safety of those?
I'm not aware of those. That is a state road, FDOT, so that any potential repairs would be something that they would look at, but certainly something we can look into and report back to them. But again, any repairs, anything that happens on Cervantes, because that's a state road, that would be within their jurisdiction. So, but obviously, like anywhere, certainly folks can call 311 and reach out to us if they notice anything out there, and we'll be happy to take a look.
Also, the lights on the bridge, the Coast Guard said it
Yes.
was concerned. What's your thoughts on
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually called after that question came up. Last week, I talked to Secretary Gaynor at FDOT. They are still with the Coast Guard right now, working through the details of the lights with the Coast Guard. So they feel like they're at the very end of that to get that final approval. And I mentioned to you guys before, the procedure and the requirements of the Coast Guard changed from the start of this project to now. So that's caused a little bit of confusion. They also had some lights during testing go out, which is why they tested them to make sure that they were working. So they've gotten those replaced and all of that. So we should be at near the end here of getting those up online. And then, of course, FDOT has designated certain holidays that they'll be using those and all of that. That'll be at their discretion. So.
On the Pensacola Motor Lodge, is that, you mentioned the reporting about, is the sale of that gone through?
No. So we wanted to get this done within our due diligence. So our last conversation was that we wanted an additional 60 days of due diligence. We had only gotten, I believe, 60 on the front end, which anybody who's looked at commercial property knows that was a request of the seller. We agreed to that, but said that might be unlikely. And then once we had a test for asbestos, I wasn't going to commit CRA dollars to something that we didn't know what we were getting into. So they were very amicable to that extension. So that allowed us enough time to be able to make a proper assessment. So we're still in due diligence at this point, but barring anything unforeseen with these final environmental tests, which again, we don't expect anything. That was the big one. We were worried about some of the materials used to build old structures. That we would proceed with the sale. So we continue to work. Our city attorney continues to work with their attorneys, but I'm much more confident today that will go through than I was a week or 2 weeks ago when we were testing for those materials.
Do you know when the due diligence period is?
I can get you those dates. It's because I don't want to misquote them now that we got the extension. But yeah, we'll share those dates with you when that is, and then how many days to close, and even that may be extended. But once the due diligence is up, we have. I think we've got several $1,000s that would be committed at that point once the due diligence was over. And but again, great step, positive news on that, and again, where I feel very confident at this point, barring something unforeseen, that we'll get that done. Yeah.
You mentioned all the hotels coming downtown. What's the status of the hotel? The lease was approved a couple of years ago for the port property site holiday. And what's the status of that?
Yeah, they actually, I just talked with Amy Miller about that yesterday. We're going to have another meeting with them. I had a meeting with them several months ago, and they were looking at some different things. They were going to put parking underneath. They may not. They'd had some conceptual drawings, but I just said with Amy, it's probably time for us to get back with them and see where they are. Now, their due diligence period, they don't have to do anything based on that lease signed for quite a while. I want to say it's closer to the end of 24 before they really have to make any decisions. It's a pretty long time. So I want to get, not because it's coming up due on them contractually, but I just want to get a little bit of a status check from them on where they are. You're also going to see something coming forward about height restrictions and the ability for us to increase height based on what the developer does, whether that's public access to the water. So really conceptually, it's the same structure as what our density bonus is, which you guys have seen. It's been enacted, not since I've been here, but it's been used in recent years. I think most recently the Sanders Beach project right there at the corner that didn't get built, but I know that had been awarded a density bonus. And it was awarded that because there was going to be public access to the water, things like that. So we're looking for the same mechanism that would allow us to increase height up to a certain amount. So it would be based on public good and materials used and all that. If they check those boxes, it would allow us to grant more height. And as we know, more verticality I don't think is a bad thing. I think that's our largest revenue stream in the general fund is property tax, and if you can use the same dirt to go 2 more floors up and increase the value of that property, that's a good thing, I believe, for the city. So those conversations, as people are starting to plan things, those are other things for the developers to be keeping in mind as well. So on top of that, there's a lot of requests about LTUs. There's a lot more strain and demand on parking. I'd like to re-entertain a conversation. I don't know that it will go anywhere. But with all of the private development between pickleball, this 9-story development, New World Landing, the Holiday Inn that exists, the potential hotel, it's probably time to rekindle some kind of public-private partnership conversation about structured parking somewhere along that line. I have not met with any of them about that. We have gotten nowhere on that. But given what's happened in these last 30 to 60 days in all of the activity, which is a great thing, we may want to rekindle. I believe there was a conversation many, many years ago, maybe under Mayor Hayward, about a potential structured parking, in that area right there north of the ferry landing. But we might want to start looking at that before all of our parking is being requested for LTUs. We want to make sure that there's enough parking for our citizens, as well as to meet some of the demand and help them offset. Maybe the developers can help offset some of the city's cost on something structured potentially. So more to come on that. And of course, I'm always fearful of the cost of structured parking. Last I heard was $30-something thousand a space. So it may not pencil out, but we'll look into it.
Mayor, I want to just follow up on that just a second. Mr. Herring, the developer of the 13th and Garden
Yes.
project, told the planning board that if you've got a redevelopment district and they're experienced in mixed-use development, you're not going to make much progress unless you've got a shared parking program going. Is this what you're referring to back behind by the port down by the ferry landing?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine, and I'm sure what we would do the first step would be to talk with these developers and see how open they are about that, especially, again, pickleball, the current hoteliers. I think we see the strain a lot during festivals and things like that as well. This, I think, could help with places like Seville and Bartram Park. But I think there's enough critical mass down there now for us to entertain that. It's just CRA. Probably. And what I would hope is say, hey, well, there's a lot of startup costs, whether you're building 50 spaces or 100 spaces. There's a lot of infrastructure that you have to put in no matter what. Why not help share in some of this cost? Maybe it's we build a structure and a certain percentage of it goes to each one of these entities based on what their need is and their contribution to it or their lease of it. Helps us offset some of that cost, because I think whether it would be valet parking for hotels, whether it's regional tournaments with pickleball, I think there could be a lot of value for us to be able to flex up and down and have additional parking in that area. And several years ago when it came up, probably wasn't the right time, but I think we are starting to approach the right time, especially if these pending projects gain more steam and we start to see shovels in the ground.
On the LTU specifically about parking,
Yeah.
one of the discussions during the planning board meeting was what to do about enforcing parking. I know you struggle with enforcement on privately owned lots.
Yep.
What do you view as the solution there as far as getting people, these LTUs, to enforce the right to parking without putting a bad taste in people's mouths?
I think that's going to be part of our conversation of what we come back out with. And I think the general structure of what we're going to look at moving forward, and this isn't something that's in an ordinance, this is just going to be the new administrative policy as it pertains to LTUs for parking, is we're going to say, here's what we believe the market rate of these spaces are. And they'll probably be tiered, right? I mean, the spaces at 13th and Gregory are different than the spaces at Palafox and Jefferson in terms of their value and what and the revenue they could create and things like that. So there'll probably be some kind of tiered system that says, hey, future developer, this is what we believe the value of these spaces are. Now, if you do certain things, if you preserve a historic building, if you for the public good, if you create public access, then there, of course, there'll be some subjectivity that if we think from an economic development standpoint that we should lower that number for some reason, then we would entertain that. And I think that's the right thing to do to make sure that it's something, that we can help incentivize good things happening in the city. But right now we come from the opposite posture, which is we charge $1,000 a year for 21 spaces, and then we have to explain why we want to charge more. And the reality is, it's clear why we want to charge more, because that's not the going rate for parking. Maybe in 1985, but not in 2023. So that's why we're going to overhaul that. And I think not just the dollar amount of what we're going to propose to folks, but some of the other things that come with that we're going to probably discuss as part of this as well.
That includes enforcement?
It probably depends on zone, and I don't mean, let me give an example. If you start paying something closer to market rate as an LTU, if I'm a developer and I were to pay something closer to market rate for LTU for parking spaces, well, then I'm probably not going to sign an LTU that lets the city leave in 30 days like we have right now. So hypothetically, many of these LTUs we have, we could get out of. But if I'm going to start paying something closer to market rate and I'm going to spend $250,000 building these parking spaces, I'm probably not going to like it if the city comes back in 90 days and says we want those back. So does enforcement become part of that conversation about market rate and what their obligation is versus what our obligation is? If these are going to be spaces that they're going to be used for a hotel, I don't see any area of which the city would be doing any enforcement. If they were paid spaces, some kind of shared spaces, maybe that we would have something to do with enforcement. But ultimately, an LTU means that those spaces go into the possession and control of that developer. So if people at the restaurant across the street are using it and it's not their hotel guests, we are going to push back on towing, on booting, and things like that. But if they're going to put a sticker in the window that says, "Hey, you're not supposed to park here," I mean, certainly that's their right because it's their spaces. So we want to be mindful of the citizen. We don't want everybody getting towed, when what they thought was public spaces. But so there's a little bit of a balance there, I guess. But again, I think those are all things that we've got to kind of outline in what will be a refreshed and modernized approach to how these LTUs will work.
Mayor, Greg Harding's told that the same planning board meeting that in a redevelopment area, the developer gets a 35%, I think it is, reduction in required parking spaces if it's in the redevelopment there. Is this linked to what you're talking about? I mean, is this still good public policy to spur development in a redevelopment area?
Yeah, so at the same time we were having conversations about height restrictions, we've had conversations about relooking at parking minimums. And I'm generally a believer in, and there's many articles, data points you can look at that suggest just the absolute over building of parking that we have in this country as a whole and how much acreage we commit to parking. I forget what the stat is about how many more parking spaces we have than vehicles in the United States. And so I think it's a general issue, but what we're seeing with some developments, especially hotels, is if they've got 130 rooms, they need the expectation from the flag, from the hotels that they're going to have 130 spaces. So I think we're going to try to strike that balance the right way. I mean, there might be some old rules on the books for maybe the 70s and 80s when we were much more dependent on the car, especially in downtown areas where that we could relook at, and maybe they don't need to be as heavy in parking. But yeah, we don't want to do something unintentional that would prohibit development because we put things in that would make it hard to do or hard to get around. So it's still a little bit of a moving target, I guess, to your question. We're going to look at priority one right now is let's modernize the policy on how the city gives away its right of way and what those obligations are. We're going to get that. So I've actually mothballed the parking minimum discussion that we were having because this is more pressing and needs to be worked out first before we look at anything else. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.